Hello, beautiful community. I'm so sorry for being late, but we are staying at my mum's and we had a surprise visitor coming to introduce Abella to their daughter for the first time. She was sleeping. I was meant to be live, but it was a really nice surprise. So anyway, I'm here. I haven't forgotten about you. And I'm just going to dive straight into this potent topic, which is, Lucy, like, what is the difference of being vulnerable from a place of power as opposed to just being vulnerable? Like, could you spell it out for me? And if you haven't already watched my free masterclass, definitely go watch that. It is pinned to the top of this group. And it's a really big distinction to get this definition of vulnerability, because for so long, I thought that I was the most vulnerable, self-expressed person. And I just couldn't understand it because, I was like, well, I'm already, I wear my heart on my sleeve and I'm being who I am. Like, why can't I get a relationship to work? But the truth is, I, first of all, was not being authentic. I wasn't bringing in the real Lucy. And most importantly, I was lacking a tremendous amount of self-worth, which comes from the inside. So what I was focusing on was looking good, being the fun date. I know I can strike up incredible conversations. I know I can be fun. I know I'm great company. But when it came to really bringing in the deeper part of myself and that inner confidence that sits really deeply within us, that just wasn't there. And so what that had me do was it had me becoming needy in relationships, my romantic relationships. So I'd come in with this bravado and this false sense of confidence, which never carried through to sort of the fourth or the fifth or the sixth plus dates. And it was like, suddenly it was always like, I have these great dates and then they follow up and they want to see me again. But then when it came to me actually bringing in who I truly was, that's where the wheels started to fall off and I just didn't know who to be and I didn't know how to show up. And it was like I suddenly didn't know how to act. And so I was leaning on alcohol, certainly dinner dates were great because I could have a few drinks, but then what happens in the day, So to really cut to the heart of this conversation, when you do not have your self-worth and the relationship with yourself dialed in, and you're not truly sitting in that deservability and that worthiness, then you are looking for validation from the outside in. And so what I would do is, if I wasn't feeling like the guy was taking the next step or initiating the next date, I would automatically flip into neediness, overanalyzing, and obviously that's a repellent when it comes to love. Like, no one wants to be around someone that's needy or insecure, right? It's like a real turnoff. And so while you might think that by expressing what you need, like say for instance, you might be saying to the guy, well, I just want to know where I stand. Like, I want to know if we're serious, or maybe you've been with someone for a while and you're like, I want to know if if you're getting ready to move in with me, or I want to meet your parents, or, talking about marriage or talking about babies. If you do not have your worthiness dialed in, it is going to come from a place of scarcity, a place of lack. And this is why your relationships are not working. So I'm going to give you an example of what it looks like when you have done the work and you're truly plugged into your own magic, your own deservability, and you absolutely know that you are deserving and that you don't have to work hard to keep a guy. You don't have to be this amazing girlfriend or cook the most dinners or overcompensate. That shit is out of alignment, and it doesn't feel good when you're overcompensating and overgiving, and it certainly doesn't feel good being needy, right? You can give me a few likes and hearts if you're just like, oh, I hate being needy. It is the worst feeling, and we always know when you get to that part of a relationship where you're starting to flip into the neediness, and it's just like the worst feeling, where you're unsure and where you feel like you're powerless, right? Like you're giving your power away to the guy, and then suddenly he's on a pedestal, and then suddenly you're trying to like work in overtime to keep that relationship going because you can feel them pulling away, right? And then it just keeps happening. And it's just extremely frustrating, and it only plants more doubt in your ability to have a good relationship when you keep experiencing your needs not being met, not feeling seen, not feeling prioritized. And this is because you're operating out of a false sense of vulnerability, which is actually the poor cousin of vulnerability. And that is neediness and insecurity. Okay. So I want you to really tune in. Oh yeah. You know what, Lucy, that's what I do. And that's your little girl who's felt abandoned. That's your little girl that does not feel enough. And so she's giving all her power away to the man and putting him on a pedestal when that's not who needs to be on the pedestal. It's you. So here's what it looks like. Once I finally did the work that I now teach and I knew my worth, then when it came to ever needing clarity in a relationship, it was a case of, I'm going to have enough courage to ask you if I need to, where you're at, but I'm truly going to be good either way. You know, so I'll give you an example. Being vulnerable from a place of power is when you're checking in to say, you know, does this relationship feel good to me? And if it doesn't, if you're not really sure about something, then you need to communicate that. But the difference is when you're in your own power and your own reverence for yourself, right? And you love and adore and cherish and accept yourself, then there is no lack, which means you're not dependent on whether the other person is into you or not, because you've got your own back. And so they are just a nice to have. Okay, this is the shift in paradigms. This is the shift that I want you to really get. And of course, yes, for many of you, there's work that you need to do to bridge this gap, to come out of the abandonment, the lack of self-worth, the disbelief that you can even have a relationship, the trust issues, right? The trauma, whatever you've been through. Absolutely, there is work to be done. This is not just, hey, let me tell you how to do this and then you go do it. But I just want to show you the landscape so that you can clearly see yourself within this and go, oh shit, I have been letting my little girl run the relationships. Because for me, for so long, my 8-year-old was running my adult relationships with men. And she was scared, she was sabotaging, she had zero value, zero trust. And in fact, relationships felt really scary, like she didn't know who to be. But once I did the work and I got it back into my queen energy and my sovereign self and my huge, expansive, big version of me, I remember being 36, living in New York, and I was like, my God, I'm ready to call in my soulmate. And let me tell you something, he is going to be so bloody lucky to have me. I have made a vow, like I'm going to be unapologetically me. I will never overcompensate again. And if I've got something on my heart that I want to ask, I'm going to bloody well ask it. And if there's something I'm not ready for, like I'm not ready to have sex, or I'm not ready to, I am just going to say that as well. Because so often women in relationships will jump into bed too soon, or thinking, oh, I better just give him a blowjob, or I better just have sex, thinking you're going to progress the relationship, when in actual fact, if it's not in alignment with you, it's completely inauthentic, and actually it's just not going to work. It just doesn't work. You know, it's about being loyal to yourself first and your needs first. So here's what it looks like. Just say you're in a relationship and you've been going out for a few months and you really like this person, but you're kind of like, oh, I feel like we're so good together. And I know it's not been a very long time, but I feel like I'm ready to move in. Like I want to really kind of dial up this relationship. Like I think this is the one, right? Just say that's where you're at. And you have a very strong sense that that's where he's at as well. But for you, you're in a place where you're like, I just want to know. I want to know that this person's on the same page as me. Well, vulnerability from a place of power looks like you instigating the conversation and just sort of saying, hey, listen, loving this relationship, loving what we've got. I can absolutely see a future with you, but I'm also just wanting to check in to make sure that we're on the same page. And I'm truly good either way. I will be upset if you're not on the same page, but I'm also ready to be with the truth because I know what I want and I know that I'm absolutely ready for that big relationship, and I'm just checking to see if that's where you're at too. And if he says, oh my God, I love this conversation, like I've been thinking and feeling exactly the same thing as you, yes, like, yes, let's move in together. I want the same thing. Beautiful. And if he or she says, I'm really enjoying this, but I'm definitely not on that page and I don't know when I will be. I do want those things, but not right now. That's beautiful as well, because it's courageous for you to actually be with that answer as well. And then you get to make a decision as to whether or not you are going to choose to stay. And honestly, I would encourage you in that particular scenario, if the person is like, I don't know, I'd encourage you to get the fuck out of there. Because the I don't know can turn from 6 months into 6 years. And I've watched that happen in many relationships where, say, the guy's not ready and the girl's like, well, he's my person, but he's not wanting to get married yet. I have watched that carry out for so long, where eventually the marriage happens, but it's coming from such a place of, well, we may as well. And that's not the goal here. The goal is about you staying true to yourself and you being able to express whatever is on your heart without the attachment that it's got to be that person. That's what true self-worth looks like, where you're living in an abundant reality where you know, if this person can't show up for me the way that I'm wanting, I know there's going to be 1 or 10 other different people that can. And that's where I was at when I met my soulmate in New York City. During the busiest time of my life, I was in such an overflow of my own self, having so much reverence, so much love, so much respect for myself, having so much fun with myself, fueling my passions, and really, really taking big, courageous leaps in my life. And I was just giddy with excitement because I knew that this was an absolute non-negotiable. And I knew that my soulmate was right there. And I was staying curious and I wasn't attached. Whereas in the past, mega attached, mega. I would make every guy the one. And every time a relationship would end, I was just so heartbroken because then I was reliving all the abandonment that I'd had as a little girl. And it was just exhausting. And it was honestly, it was such a waste of time. It was so much drama. And all the while along, like, it was me just acting like a kid in my relationships instead of as the woman who's backing herself, who trusts herself, who loves herself. And when you do the work to move into that version of yourself, then the guy or the girl is no longer on the pedestal and you can be with anything and you can ask anything, because trust me, you're not going to be too much for the right person. The right person is going to love that you instigated that conversation, and they're going to love that you're truthful and honest and authentic, and they're going to love you even more. And the wrong person is going to find it too much. Why are you wanting to get so serious so soon? And da-da-da-da-da. Bye. Peace out. I'm not doing my life on your timeline. I know what I want, and I was hoping this was it, but it's totally cool if you're not there yet. I'm going to release this relationship. And that's just an example of being vulnerable from a place of power. I want you to hear it this way: being vulnerable from a place of overflow, where your cup spilleth over of your own magic, of your own self-love, of your own self-worth. And that's that beautiful, deep, intimate relationship that I help women build with themselves, so that you've got the dynamics right to enter into a relationship. And that's where, yeah, like instigating a conversation like, hey, are we on the same page? Like, that's really vulnerable. You know, I remember asking the guy before, one of my friends in New York, I remember asking him like, hey, like, are you feeling something here? He was just a good friend of mine. And he's like, in the past I have, but like not right now. Like, I don't think that you're it. And that was really vulnerable for me to ask such a good guy friend. But I was in a place where I was in such deservability that I was like, I'm okay if it's a no. And I would rather ask and see if it's right in front of me. And if it's not, then I can move on from thinking that that might be it. And that's being vulnerable and bold, but it's also not dependent on the other person's response. And so just as, you know, you might think that you've been vulnerable in the past, if you look back, you'll be like, well, actually, no, my little girl was acting out. Like for me, if I was in a relationship, just say for instance, and I just, you know, we just had some fun together in bed. And then if the guy didn't hug me, instead of me saying, hey, I'd really love you to hug me, like that would make me feel really nurtured and, you know, really, really good, I would roll over and I would be crying, literally, like a little 8-year-old, instead of actually expressing myself. And then I'd wait for him to ask me, are you okay? And it was this whole attention thing. And then it would end up in like a fight. And it was my little girl acting out. And all the while I thought I was being vulnerable, But I wasn't. I was playing games and I was being insecure and needy and pushing the guy away instead of telling someone how I feel and asking for what I want. And if that person can't give it to you, that's okay too. But move on. End the relationship. And this is not just in romantic relationships. This is in all relationships where being vulnerable from a place of power is only ever going to serve you. And it's going to strengthen the relationship with yourself every time that you have the courage to speak up and to ask for what you want and to be who you really are, instead of like, oh yeah, everything's fine. And it's not. Oh yeah, no, that's okay. Just like come half an hour late to the date, or yeah, just don't hug me after sex. Oh no, that's fine. What the fuck is that? That's being fake, right? That's a whole other conversation. But vulnerability is vital in entering into a soulmate relationship, and being vulnerable from a place of power is going to have you in a sublime heart-connected relationship. Being vulnerability's poor cousin, which is needy and insecure, is going to keep you miserable and in and out of the same type of relationships that keep letting you down. And behind that energy of victimhood is a lot of hurt that you've experienced in the past within your own family growing up, where your little girl wasn't getting her needs met and you never felt like the priority, and it's still playing out now in your 30s and your 40s, 50s, 60s and beyond. So this is a very, very key area that I invite you all to take a look at and to really take in this conversation very deeply, to know that until you get this plugged in, you're wasting your time in relationships, because you're not in my community because you want some average relationship that will do. You're drawn to this community and to my messages because you know that you are worth everything, and that you want to have a beautiful, deep, fulfilling, heart-connected relationship where you feel like the priority, where you feel like you can say anything, and most of all, where you can show up and be you and be celebrated for being you. Because at the core of this conversation, so many of you are terrified that once a guy or a girl in a romantic relationship get to see the real you, that they're going to be out. And that's doing relationships from a very scared, insecure place. And I invite you to take relationships off the table until you work on this and get the support with this to get this dialed in. Because for every single one of you in this community and every single one of you watching this live, my vision for you is to do the work so you can step into the incredible woman that you are and call in and command a beautiful relationship that you are just so grateful for, that makes you expand and grow into the beautiful woman that you were born to be, where you feel just so excited to be part of this partnership. That's what's available for you. But you can't do it without vulnerability from a place of power. And that was one of the biggest turning points in my life personally that completely changed the game for me. And if I can do that and all my clients can do that, then you can do that too. And it's a process as well. You know, it's not like you just tick off the vulnerability box. But once you learn how to actually be with yourself and how to show up as you fully, then it gets easier and easier and easier, where you're going to love being vulnerable from a place of power. It's like, yes, this is so much better than pretending everything's fine when it's not. Does that make sense? So any questions that you've got or any comments that you have, please post them below and I'll happily get back to them. And yeah, any conversations you want us to talk about, me, on these Q&As, then please just post in the comments or message us so that we can talk about those as well. Okay? Big, big love. Mwah.